Hey guys, welcome to the video. This one's going to be a inventory system. So I actually did an inventory system a little while back, but it wasn't a very good inventory system. It had some problems, and so I want to redeem myself here and make a really robust, solid inventory system. And I think you guys are really going to like the way this system works. So without further ado, let me show you basically the system. Now the Patreon followers will get a different system. You'll actually get a nicer system. Which I will show in a second, but here's the basic one. So here's what you guys are going to get anyway. So if I pick up the X, pick up logs and stuff, it's exactly like an inventory system should be. If I press I can actually open up my inventory, and it's drag and drop, so I can actually drag and drop different items around and stuff. And you can craft items too. So here I've got this couch, and I made it so that if you have two chairs, you can make a couch out of the chairs. So if I use the chairs on each other, there you go. I now have a couch. By that same token, I can do use my axe on these logs to get planks, and I'm aware I have a terrible thumbnail for these planks here. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the basic item system. This is not networked, but it's very expandable, very robust, and it's made with designers in mind. So, for example, if you're making a game and you want your designers to be able to add hundreds of their own items, then this system's really set up in a way that C++ does all the heavy lifting, and then blueprints allow the designers to do whatever they like, really. So that's the real basic system. I think you guys are really going to like it though, and I'll show you guys the Patreon system real quick, and then we'll get started with the video. Okay guys, so here's a system that you're going to get if you join the Patreon. Now, don't worry, you can join the Patreon months down the line and you will still get this video. So the way it works is, as soon as you become a patron, you will get all of the Patreon exclusive videos and all the ones that are released after that. Anyway, so this system is a little bit more based around online, so it's fully networked. So if you're looking to make a game like H1Z1 or Rust or DayZ, then this is a much better system. And the way it works is pretty much the same deal. It's an item system that uses the same core fundamentals, but it's also integrated with a clothing system. It's networked. You still have the crafting system, so I'll show you. I have these buckets of paint here. So if I pick up a bucket of lava and use it on my M4A1, I can actually craft a new M4A1, and I can actually put it on as well, as you can see. So that's the system. It's made to be networked. It's made to work online. It has a bunch of extra features, you know, guns, aiming, shooting, that sort of thing. And this is for the Patreon, so do consider supporting me on Patreon. But, you know, if you don't want to, you still get the base system. Anyways, let's get started with the video. Alright guys, so we just have to take a couple of minutes just to get the project set up and get all ready. So let's go into this little sources panel here, and what I'm going to do is make some new folders. We'll make one called UI. Another one can be called data. The data one is going to hold a database with every item that's in our game. And then I'll also make one called blueprints. And blueprints is just going to store any blueprints we make, any blueprint children, anything like that. So we're going to be using our own custom player controller, our own custom game mode, that sort of thing. So what I need to do is actually make a bunch of classes. So we'll come in here. Right now we just have the character and the game mode. I'm going to add a new game mode. And the game mode, for anyone that doesn't know, the game mode is pretty much just a way to drive rules. So the game mode will define what items are in our game, or what is the max amount of players that should be in our game. It just deals with the rules. So we're going to make a game mode, and I'm going to call this gameplay game mode. So all I'm doing with this game mode is I'm just going to store a data table in it for now, but of course you can add more stuff into your game mode later on. You might say in your game mode, what is the max amount of time that a player can be inactive before we kick him from the game, or something like that. So all that is defined inside of the game mode. we're going to make a new C++ actor called interactable. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Tom Lumen, but Tom Lumen has a system called the usable actor system, which basically just says you define one actor called usable, and every actor inherits from that is usable. I've been doing the same thing for a while, but I've always called mine interactables. Basically, this is an actor called interactable, and any item in my game which I deem to be interactable will inherit from this class, and it makes it really easy to do interaction in your game. So for example, a lever that the player can pull would be an interactable. A pickup that we pick up off the ground, so an item, would also be an interactable. An NPC that we can talk to would be an interactable. So all of these things will inherit from interactable. So it's really nice to just have it all in the one class and then just inherit from that. Okay, we're going to do the controller next. So show all classes. And I'll do controller. And we're going to make a new player controller. Go to next. And I'm going to call this gameplay controller. So, briefly, I'll just talk about a player controller. So, the character in Unreal Engine is made up of two parts. We have the pawn, which is the mesh, the physical representation, basically, and the controller is the brain of the character, basically. So, yeah, again, I've probably said this before, but it's like a sock puppet. The pawn is the puppet itself, and the controller is kind of like the hand inside the puppet, moving it all around and stuff. So, yeah, and then we want our pickups to interact from usable, so I'm going to create a C++ class called pickup, and we'll just go to create a class here. And once we've created this class, that will be all the classes that we need for this project. So that's all set up. What I'm going to do now is go into UI, and I'll just make some new HUDs. So I'm going to make a new widget blueprint. So just right click, go to user interface, and select widget blueprint. And I'm going to call it WB_inventory. And I'm also just going to make one for in-game as well, because why not? So I'll click on this, Control W to duplicate, and then I'm going to call this in-game. So we have two widget blueprints, one for the inventory and one for our in-game HUD. We need a couple of widgets that will go inside of other widgets. These are called controls. So whenever I make a control, I just call it C underscore, just so that I know it's a control. So these are going to be the inventory slots. And then we have one more, so just Control W. And this is going to be called inventory slot drag. So this is the inventory slot. When you open up your inventory, you're going to have a bunch of different inventory slots, one for each of your items. We have this drag, and this is the widget that's shown when the player actually tries to drag one of their items. So, yeah, that's what that is. You'll see a bit more on that later on. This is the in-game HUD, and this is the inventory screen. Let's just do some inventory stuff, why not? So, when you open up the inventory, you'll just have a blank inventory. I've just got my other project open, so I can reference that, but we'll just speed through this. I'm just going to put some text here, anchor it to the top like that, and I'm going to call this inventory. We can center that, why not? Okay. What I'm going to do now is also put an image on here, and this is just going to serve as a background, so just drag out an image. We can center it to the center of the screen like that. And what I'll also do is we will make it black as well. So 0, 0, 0, and then I'll do 0.7 for the alpha, so it's kind of see-through. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is put a wrap box on our canvas panel like this. So just drag the wrap box, drop it onto the canvas panel, and the wrap box should be in the same place as the background image. and you want to make sure that's centered. A wrap box, by the way, is just a box that holds a bunch of children in it. The children, in this case, are going to be our inventory items. So, yeah. I'm just going to put a real tiny button up here and just scroll down and add an on-clicked. And when we click on this button, I just want to say remove from parent. So that's just a button that will close the HUD, basically. I'll just add that in there real quick. And I think that's pretty much it for the inventory screen. I just made it really simple. You guys can make it more complex if you want. Okay, so inventory slot. For my inventory slot, I have a image for the background, so I can drag an image on here. By the way, the size of my inventory slot, if we go to custom, I made them 225 by 225. But I mean, obviously, you can adjust this to your own needs. You can put whatever you want, basically. The image is going to be the size 225 by 225. Okay. Now, I had a nice wooden background image. Feel free to make something on Photoshop if you really want a nice design, but I'm just going to go with this white background for now. So what we're going to do is we will add a second image, like that. And I'm also going to add some text. So to add text, you just drag and drop that in there. And I'm going to wrap this image. If we go wrap with size box, we can actually set some of the properties up here for our size box. So if I click on the size box, we want to override the width and the height. And I'll just go to 140. Like that. And let's click on our image. And I'm just going to set a default image. If we type in bush, T_bush D. I'm just putting that in there just so it's there. But you guys don't have to worry about that. Now we can set the location. I'm just going to copy what I have for my other project. So we'll do 68 and 16 and 142 by 142. So there you go. And I'll just center it in the middle here. That's a little bit better. Okay, there we go. So this is going to be the image of our item. Now right now I've just selected bush, so that's all we can see. But that's going to look different, obviously. Let's change the back of this. If I go to the background image here, I'm just going to change the background image to be a little bit darker. And then we'll move some text. We'll just put that down here. And of course I'm going to center it. And then we can just anchor it to the bottom here. So I'll just drag that over there. So this is going to be our inventory slot. Now, I did make a nice background in Photoshop. Like I said, you can copy that if you want. Make your own background. But yeah. So that's the inventory and inventory slots done. What we're going to do now is the in-game HUD, which is very, very easy to do. So for the in-game HUD, all we have is a couple of bits of text. So we'll put some text here. We're going to center it. And I'm just going to put in here, I'm just going to say item, press E to pick up. Now we're going to change that when our game is running so that it says log, press E to pick up, or X, press E to pick up. But for now we can just have item. And we're going to create a binding. And I'm going to click on the function here that we just created, and I'll rename that to get pickup text. So that's a function that we're going to deal with later on. We're not going to go into that just yet though. And then also I'll add a crosshair on the middle of the screen. So we'll just duplicate this text. I'm just going to make the text a dot. And all we're going to do is just put it right in the center of the screen there. So now we have a nice little crosshair. So a really quick way to debug your HUD and make sure it actually works is if I go to blueprints, open level blueprint, save our project first. I'm just going to right click in the middle of the blueprint and just type in begin play. And I'm going to say that on event begin play, I'm just going to drag out and then say create widget. I'm going to right click again and get the player controller. Get player controller will just get the controller of our player, because remember our player is made up of two parts, the pawn and the controller. If we call get character, that will get the pawn, and if we call get controller, that will get the controller. So we can plug that in there. And then finally drag out and type in add to viewport, and that's going to add the HUD to our viewport. So now if I compile, yeah, we need to select the class. So select in game. And now if you hit play, as you can see, our text is not showing anything, the pickup text, but you can see there is a cross here in the middle of the screen, so that's working. And also I'm just going to go to the blueprints here and just move the camera over. So if you go to third person blueprints, open up your character, in the viewport, all I'll do is just move the camera to the side. I just think that looks a bit nicer. So there you go. That's kind of personal preference. Okay, now we're going to deal with the controller. So I'll see you guys over in that. So just to open that up, you just double click like that. Okay guys, so it's time to get started with the programming. What I'm going to do is I'll just lay down some real basic code. If we go to craftsystem.h, I'm just going to change this to engine.h. And what I'm also going to do is include a definition here. So what I'm going to do is say define collision interactable ECC underscore game trace channel 1. That'll come in handy later on. You'll see what that'll do later on. But for now, we're just going to define that. Just put it there. Save and close. And we're coming to the character. So basically, our items are going to be made of structs, and we need to define those structs. So if I go to the character here, .h, I'm just going to come right to the top of the .h. And I'm going to make a new struct. I'm going to call it inventory item. So if inventory item, and it's going to inherit from table row base, like that. Now the reason it needs to inherit from table row base is because we want to use this in a data table, and to use it in a data table, it needs to inherit from table row base. And then we also need to include the header file for that, which is engine/data table.h. So now we're going to make a struct that represents our inventory item. So there are two types of items. There's going to be the pickups, which the player will pick up off the ground. And when you pick the pickup up, the pickup gets destroyed, and it will add one of these inventory items to your inventory. So each inventory item is going to have a item ID. It's going to have the pickup, because imagine that you pick an item up, but then you drop it on the ground again. We need to spawn the pickup back into the world. So if you pick an axe up and then you drop the axe, the pickup for the axe gets spawned underneath the player. So to do that, we have a subclass of pickup, and we're going to call that item pickup. We also need a name for our item. Well, the next thing we're going to have is a description of our item. So this is going to be a ftext description, and bool b can be used. So this is going to be true if the item can be used, otherwise it's going to be false. Now whenever I make a struct, I want to add all the Unreal header stuff to it, so I'm going to put a generated body in there. I'm also going to say use struct blueprint type, and this will allow blueprints to actually use this struct as well. So that's all that does. And then we're going to add a U property to all of these. So U property, edit anywhere, and blueprint read write. And then I'm just going to add that to everything. So that everything in here is editable and read and writable. I cannot talk. Okay, so that's the inventory item struct. Now we actually need one more struct, and the other struct is going to store all of our valid craft combinations. So this is not just an item system, but it's actually also a crafting system, so you'll be able to craft items later on. So what we need is another struct that just stores some information about what items we can craft. So it'll store some data that says like, hey, if I'm a log, if you use an axe on me, give the player a plank. Or if I'm a camo, when you use me on a gun, I want you to make this item. So it just stores that sort of data. But this is a really easy struct, so same deal, blueprint type. There's going to be a struct, and we're going to call this one crafting info. So we also want the generated body on there. Okay, so in here we're going to have a component ID. We're going to have a product ID. I'll show you guys what this is in a second. But because this is a scalable inventory system, it's going to be like a big inventory system. Every item in the game is going to have an item ID. And that's going to be used to identify every item. So whenever we are crafting, we deal with IDs and not item names. And the reason we use IDs is because IDs are less likely to go wrong. So for example, you can very easily mistype a name, but it's actually very hard to get an ID wrong. And then I'm just going to add two balls here. Destroy item A and destroy item B. And again, we need our U property on there, so we'll just add that to everything, like so. So let's quickly explain what all this is. Component is the item that is being used to create the item. This is the... So if I'm a log, this is going to be the ID of the axe. And this is going to be the ID of the plank. So this is the item that we need to use to create something, and this is the ID of the item that actually gets created. So if we're a log, this is going to be the ID of the axe, and this is going to be the ID of the plank, basically. And you can add as many of these as you want, so you'll see later on anyway. And then we have two balls. Do we want to destroy the axe when we use? You might even want to call this destroy component, but I've gone with item A and item B. Yeah, you'll see these come into use later on anyway. So I'm going to add one more thing here, and that's just a T array of crafting info. So yeah, all this is going to hold is all of the valid craft combinations, all of the things that can be crafted from this item, basically. Okay, so I know that was a little bit complex. We do need to do one last thing for the inventory item as well. It's just to if inventory item. I'm just going to set some defaults. So the name by default is going to be equal to item. Obviously you're going to want to change this stuff. Action by default is just going to be equal to use. And by setting some defaults in here, it just makes our life a little bit easier later on. So yeah, use. Description, is going to be equal to please enter a description for this item. And then finally, I'm just going to set the value equal to 10 gold, or $10. Okay, one last thing, and I will explain why this needs to happen, but if you do not understand, that's completely fine. What I'm going to do is what is called an operator overload. And I will try to explain what this does, but I'm just going to write this out really quick. So what we're doing here is we're overloading the equals operator. So currently I cannot do this. I can't compare two inventory items because C++ doesn't know how to compare inventory items. So all I'm doing is just telling C++ how to compare inventory items with each other. We need this later on because we're going to be removing from an inventory, and Unreal requires that we actually overload that data, which is a little bit weird, but you just have to do that, otherwise the array can't remove. As you'll see later on, whenever we want to remove an item from the player's inventory, we cannot do it unless we do this thing here, so that is what that is. Okay. So we need a couple of functions in our player. I'm going to make one called check for usables. Sorry, check for interactables. And we need to implement this function, so I'll just copy this over. And if we open up the craft system character.cpp, I'm just going to put it in here. Craft system character. So what this is going to do is it's basically just going to cast array once every tick and try to find an interactable object, something that we can interact with. And if it does find something that we can interact with, then it will set that value up in our player controller over here. So I need to include the interactable class, so include interactable.h. First thing I'm going to do is store a hit result, so hit result. I'm going to store the start and end of my line trace. So the start of our trace is going to be the follow camera. And the end trace is going to be the forward vector of our camera times by, say, 300. And then we just add the start trace onto that. And what that does is it will just get a nice start and end point for our player. We're getting some errors here. I think it's just because of our structs. So what I'm going to do is just save and build. Okay, so everything is built correctly. So nothing's wrong with our code. So I can just close Visual Studio. I'm going to open the character back up. And now all of those errors should go away. So sometimes when you add new structs and things like that, you will get some weird errors like that. So it is a good idea to just occasionally compile. So let's quickly finish off our function. What I'm going to do is add an ignored actor to the query params. So when you add an ignored actor, it will ignore anything that is in this ignored actors array. And so we're just ignoring ourselves, basically. So that way our line trace cannot accidentally just hit the character, because that would be a disaster if that happened. I'm also going to add the controller, so gameplay controller .h. And we're going to get a reference to the controller because we need to set something inside the controller in a second. But I have not shown you guys what that is yet, so I'll show you that in a sec. But because we're inside of a pawn, all we need to do to get the controller is just call this function called getController. So now we're going to cast a ray cast and see if we actually see an item that we can interact with. So we just do if getWorld line trace single by channel, hit result, start trace, end trace. We're going to cast using the visibility channel. We can change this later on if we want a custom channel, and I might actually add that. And then we'll say query params as well. And then I'm going to put the and I'm going to put and controller. So we're going to make sure that the controller is actually valid as well. So we make sure we have a valid controller. Now I'm going to put a comment, check if the item we hit was a interactable item. So if interactable hit result dot get actor. So get whatever actor we've hit and try to cast it into an interactable. And if it works, then set the current interactable to be equal to interactable. And I haven't made this variable yet, so we'll do that in a second. But once we've done that, we can just return. If we did not hit a interactable object, so I'll just say if we didn't hit anything, or the thing we hit was not a usable or interactable, set the current interactable to null pointer. So we just say controller current interactable equals null pointer. So now we'll just quickly go to the gameplay controller. And I'm just going to add a public section here, and I'm going to say class, oops, I'll put a little comment here, the interactable that the player is currently looking at, this will be equal to null pointer if there is, or if the player is not looking at something that is interactable. Okay, so we have a really basic system going on where we can make interactables. So that's a good start. And I think I'll end it there. In the next video, we're going to continue on, add some more stuff with the pickups, and then I think by the end of the next video, we will have a working inventory system, and then the third video is going to focus on the crafting side. So I'll see you guys there.